reran the Eustace Mullins conversation I was fortunate enough to have with this remarkable man of our times, and I was equally as fortunate to convince him to come back tonight for part 2 of our conversation. Hopefully there will be others. He is, as many of you know, a legendary figure, and I'll leave it up to you to listen and make up your own mind about that. If you're in any doubt at all, you won't be after the next couple of hours. He, of course, is in the archives back on the 21st. You can hear that part 1 if you'd like. Eustace Mullins, I don't know what to even say about the man. So much has been said and written over the years. He's just a real piece of American history, and he is with us tonight. We're going to talk about everything from Ezra Pound to Senator Joseph McCarthy to the Federal Reserve tonight, as only Eustace Mullins can speak. Welcome back, Eustace.
Oh, I'm glad to be back with you.
Well, thank you. You're very busy, and it's always amazing to see the email come in after you've been on the program. Even when I ran the conversation part 1 over again, I still got emails. So you're a pretty popular guy out there.
Well, I never tried to tell anyone what they wanted to hear. I tell them what I thought was going on.
See, that's a novel approach. I like that idea. Tell them the truth. The issue of Ezra Pound. Now, you were I guess we could call you a protege.
I was the last living protege, actually.
Yeah. Talk to us about Ezra Pound, what he was, why he was important, and why you want to speak about him this evening.
Well, I crossed the threshold when I met Ezra Pound because it changed my life. One of the few things that actually affected me, so I went right out of myself. The only other instance was when I went to the Nagasaki Atomic Museum in Nagasaki. That also knocked me over.
If that doesn't knock you over, nothing will. I agree. But well, Ezra Pound had that kind of an impact on you. What was it about him that was so cosmically special?
It wasn't about him. It was about his situation. The situation so astounded me that here is a man who had never harmed any person in his life, and here he was, his own government, his own people, had locked him into a dingy asylum with a life sentence without trial. And it just hit me like a railroad train when I saw him.
What was the basis of his incarceration, the official word? What were they trying to nail him on?
Treason. And his indictment was entirely drawn up by the country's leading authority on treason, a man named Alger Hiss.
Ah, yes.
Because Hiss had been a traitor for many years.
Sure had.
So if anybody understood it, he did.
If anybody could write it up, it was Alger Hiss. Amazing. Well, the Hiss and Nixon twosome, as it were, in history is well known by a lot of people. I'm reminded of what's going on right now to a man named Ernst Zundel, who was illegally arrested.
Well.
Yeah,
Ernst is a Gemütlichkeit German. He's the last person in the world that you would think anybody would have a vendetta against.
Yeah.
But boy, he has been through more than I have.
Arrested illegally in Tennessee, taken, of course, to jail, deported to Canada, where he has been, I guess, incarcerated a total of 6 months now. His health is in serious decline. He's finally gotten a bail hearing. We're trying to stay on top of that story. And friends, whether you agree or disagree with anything Ernst Zundel has ever said or printed or reprinted, you better take note of this case. This man is being persecuted in the grandest, most hideous, grotesque sense of a political prisoner you will ever see, probably in the next couple or 10 or 20 years. This is an incredible story, so keep your eye on it. But back to Ezra Pound, in jail for life, for nothing.
For nothing. He never committed any treason. In fact, they had absolutely nothing to try him on. That's why he was never tried.
Funniest thing, huh?
Yeah, the government refused to try him for 13 years, but they held him the whole time. In fact, I think that's where John Ashcroft got his idea of running this whole deal that he's running. He saw that Ezra Pound was a trial case. After Ezra, you could do it to anybody.
Well, there's the template right there. Sure.
Yes.
Sure. Just about throw away the key. Certainly, they put it in deep freeze. 13 years of his life, gone.
The best years of his life, really. He was at the culmination of his career, and he was simply stopped from working. The biggest thing that can happen to you is for them to stop you from working, and that's what most of the pressure against me has been done, to keep me from writing any more books or making any more appearances. They had these hysterical incidents in Canada last year where the whole country was aroused against me, but because I was coming up to speak at a little health convention.
How dare you?
Yeah. Nothing about Jews, or nothing about Israel, nothing about communism. I was just going to talk about health.
It's the nerve of this man. Yeah, it's true. It's remarkable what happens to people who, at one point or another, do criticize current regime in Israel or other issues that may be politically incorrect. You have paid an incredible price about that. What happened in the Canada situation? What was the outcome?
Oh, well, they did not deport me, and they did not arrest me, although they claimed they were looking for me to arrest me a number of times. The carloads of Secret Service or whatever they are were driving up and down looking for me. And they had heard that was one place, and they couldn't find me, and they go somewhere else looking for me. And meanwhile, I was just walking around enjoying the scenery.
Pretty good intelligence service, eh?
Yeah.
Gee.
Well, it's like all intelligence services. They're all exactly alike, and they work together, and they're just all as bumbling and inefficient.
You know, why is it that we still have, Eustace Mullins, this image of a highly efficient, competent, leave no stone unturned, very clever and cunning intelligence agency? Whichever agency it may be, we've got this image that these people are nearly flawless, when in point of fact, the opposite is usually true.
Well, I think it's always true.
All right. Well, I was giving him a benefit there that you're not willing to.
The Dulles boys are typical of that.
Well, the Dulles boys had as big an impact on the United States for about a third of a century as any two brothers have ever had, that's for sure.
Well, they were always organized, and they were focused, and they always managed to do what they were doing.
To come hell or high water, they did it.
They did it. And I don't think they had any goals at all. I never could see that either one of them had any goals.
Now, that's an interesting statement. They were just doing it because they could do it.
Well, they were doing it because they were successful Wall Street lawyers, and they could make a lot of money and have a lot of influence and power by running errands for the Wall Street gang and various international people. You know, the Dulles boys met with Adolf Hitler right after the elections of 1933. He'd spent all his money on elections, and the Nazi Party was absolutely flat broke. So he sent out a distress call, and the Dulles brothers flew to Cologne to confer with him, and they guaranteed him the money to keep going.
I have never heard this before. That is amazing.
It's in my Federal Reserve book.
Yeah. That's an amazing story in and of itself.
Oh, that's been documented in many places. It's a fantastic story in the 20th century.
Well, there you go. The Dulles boys go to meet with Adolf Hitler, guaranteeing him the money to keep going after the election and the bankruptcy virtually of the Nazi Party. And they did it. Now, how does Prescott Bush figure into this issue? He was, of course, busted twice during the war on charges of what amount to trading with the enemy, otherwise being involved with the alleged enemy during World War II, that being, of course, the government of Germany. So was there a tie between Prescott Bush and the Dulles brothers, or are these just two different monetary entities reaching out and
they
connecting?
were all working together.
Okay.
A very unified group. They were mostly, you could call them the Rothschild-Rockefeller group. You see, just like that, the Cologne meeting in 1933, the Cologne meeting was not to bail out Hitler. They were intended to guarantee World War II.
Oh, they wanted that for sure. So
without Hitler, there'd be no World War II.
That's right.
And a lot of people have been very disappointed if that happened.
Nobody gets rich. 50 million people don't get killed. Uncle Joe Stalin doesn't become our best buddy for a while. All our nuclear secrets can't be flown out of the country to the Soviet Union during the war. And yes, they were. If you ever read Major Jordan's diaries, which I'm sure you have, Eustace, years ago.
Oh, yes. Major Jordan's diaries is a terrific book.
Now, that's another book that ought to be standard reading in every high school history class and college class.
I haven't seen it around for years. I don't think anybody carries it anymore.
I have a copy. Very briefly, Major Jordan was an American military man who was put in charge of one phase or another of flights of cargo aircraft, which departed from, what was it, Montana or Wyoming, Eustace? And they flew the long route into the Soviet Union through the back door. They flew for years and years and years. And Major Jordan got, at one point, real irritated at what was going on because he wasn't allowed to know what the manifests were. All he could see were these, in many cases, locked satchels with I guess they were sealed and locked, and so forth, boxes and boxes of material. So at one point, now the crews were American, the pilots were American, but the security people in the aircraft were usually Soviet soldiers. So he went into the back with some American GIs and demanded that one of these boxes or several be opened. And, well, we'll come back and finish this story in just a minute. Eustace knows it well, and it's all true. American history, folks, is not what you read in the history books. We shall continue in just a few minutes. Jeff Rense with Eustace Mullins, one of our true treasures, and very honored to have him on the program tonight. So Major Jordan watched these flights month after month. I forgot how long he was on duty there, but he was our liaison. Again, Soviet personnel in the air, our aircraft, these are our planes, our pilots are flying them, Soviet guards in the back, and these sealed containers, sealed boxes, sealed satchels were going out week after week, month after month, year after year during World War II. What were they? What was in there? Well, Major Jordan went in with some guards and actually had the GIs put their, I guess they were M1s, right on the Soviet guards, and they apparently were at one point Eustace begging, please not to open the crates. Please don't do this. Don't open these boxes. Don't open these satchels. And he said, the hell with you, get out of the way. And he went and opened them up. And you want to give us just a thumbnail of some of the items, some of the kinds of things that were in there that we were sending to the Soviets?
Well, as my memory serves, it was principally samples of uranium.
Not only were there nuclear materials.
Yeah, nuclear material.
But there were plans, there were scientific papers, there were research documents, there were complete maps of all strategic installations of energy, of roadways, of communications, of transportation. Basically, the entire infrastructure of the United States of America, from its top secret nuclear weapons program right on down, were being shipped to the Soviets during World War II. Now this you can take to the bank. I am not exaggerating. You read Major Jordan's diaries. I guess he published that book in the 1950s originally.
Yes.
Look, treason doesn't even come close to what was going on in World War II. And if you think these flights weren't going on without the knowledge of the highest levels of the American government, you're wrong.
Well, I have to interject something in here.
Sure, please.
At the time, Stalin was not the head of the United States at that time. Averell Harriman was the head of Russia. And Averell Harriman was running Russia while Franklin D. Roosevelt and his three communist boys were running Washington.
Yeah, I like the way he always turns this around. Averell Harriman, again, that nice man from Pennsylvania, was actually running much of what was... The whole of World War II was an orchestrated slaughter.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Done for the profit of the elite, and they made, well, now it would probably be $1 trillion. Who knows how much? God only knows how much money.
Oh, they've been riding on it ever since.
And the Cold War, 50 years of the Cold War, was another, essentially a hoax. It was all set up, all of it. No accidents. No accidents.
Well, Norman Potterit says in his autobiography that the whole purpose of the Cold War was to keep us on an enormous defense budget,
sure,
so that we could send enough armaments to Israel to enable Israel to survive against the Arabs.
Israel picked up the ball pretty quickly on its own and is now probably the fifth ranking world's thermonuclear power. They have through all three tiers of delivery systems for nuclear weapons, of course. They also have chemical and biological weapons, which are probably second to none. It goes on and on. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process, and they're doing exactly what they plan to do. So they've got the program, and we pick up the bills.
Yeah, well, and now I had a paper. It's an official Air Force document, and I ran it as a feature some months ago, and I've forgotten the title of it. I'll try and find it and put it back up there. It's basically what it is an official Air Force white paper, which is circulated amongst the highest levels of the Air Force Academy, and so forth. And it says in there, in no uncertain terms, that the threat of Israeli nuclear blackmail is a fact of life in the United States and has had serious impacts on almost all major decisions regarding the Middle East and other issues for years. Nuclear blackmail from our friend and ally, Israel. And if you don't believe it, this is an official Air Force white paper. It was up at Rense.com for weeks. Read it and weep, folks. It's a different world than ABC, NBC, CBS, State Fox Television, and the rest would have you believe. It's a con job, and we are the dupes and the dupees.
And all of our Charlie McCarthy's in Washington mouth the same story, that Israel is our only reliable ally in the Middle East.
The only one, and who was it? The House Majority Leader, DeLay, said that Israel's fight is our fight.
Well, George Bush says at the beginning of the Iraq War, our mission is to protect Israel. You can't get any plainer than that.
As if Israel needs protection. The world's fifth ranking, that's my estimate. Maybe sixth, who knows, it doesn't matter. They've got it all, and have had for many years. But nobody's talking about weapons of mass destruction in terms of Israel, are they?
Not at all.
Haven't heard that. It's the funniest thing. All right, we'll pause. Come right back with Eustace Mullins in just a couple minutes. What? Okay, right back with Eustace Mullins, and yes, it is still okay, friends, to criticize any government, including our own in this country and elsewhere, and we do, as do many Jews around the world, not approve of many of the things that the Israeli regime is up to. In fact, today, the story came through from Reuters, I think, that Sharon has ordered the continuation of new settlements in Gaza in strict contravention to what has been pledged and what is being talked about in terms of the Israeli roadmap to peace, which is just another hustle number 28. The joke continues, Eustace.
It does indeed, and our president, George Bush, is complaining about these new settlements, but unfortunately, he has very little say in the matter.
Talks cheap. He's just, he's throwing out a few bones to the people who really still care. Here's another one. Now, imagine if in this country we enacted a law that said no American citizens could marry anybody from Mexico. How long do you think a law like that would stand if it ever got passed? Doesn't that sound a little racist to you?
Well, particularly in line of the recent pronunciations of the Supreme Court, that you have to have diversity in order to learn anything.
Of course, absolutely. Here's the story from The Independent in the UK. Israel's parliament has passed a law preventing any Palestinians who marry Israelis from living in Israel, called racism. But that's okay over there. Anyway, what a strange world. Go ahead, Eustace. I'm getting astray here.
Oh, yes. No, we're not going astray at all. We're going a straight line.
I was being facetious. I thank you.
But that's a shocking story. And as I say, it goes right against the grain of our entire Supreme Court.
Right.
But as I've been talking with the guy for the last 5 weeks on the radio about the Articles of Confederation being superseded by the Constitution. And the important thing about the Constitution was that they included a provision that only the Supreme Court could interpret the Constitution. So, and anything that the Supreme Court said came to the law of the land.
Right.
So that was the Trojan horse that was in this miraculous Constitution of 1787.
Yep.
And that Trojan horse has run the country ever since.
Interesting point. Fascinating. Here's another note about that. Our friends at Amnesty International, they sure have ignored Ernst Zundel. Not a word about Ernst's plight from Amnesty, but here they are. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch sent a joint letter to the Knesset, Israel's parliament, urging members to reject the bill I mentioned a minute ago. It said in their own literature, quote, "The draft law barring family reunification for Palestinian spouses of Israeli citizens is profoundly discriminatory." So said Amnesty International. Another quote, "A law permitting such blatant racial discrimination on grounds of ethnicity or nationality would clearly violate international human rights law and treaties which Israel has ratified and pledged to uphold," end quote. So the circus continues.
Oh, it does indeed, but at least we can be comforted by the fact that Sandra O'Connor would never vote for a law like that.
Sandra O'Connor. Another light in the history of, well, in the pantheon of great Supreme Court justices.
Well, our first female justice.
She was indeed, as far as we know. Okay, now, back to Ezra Pound. Let's finish the Ezra Pound story. Then we're going to move on to tell people a little bit about one of the usually referred to as one of the blackest names in American history, Senator Joseph McCarthy. So tell us, finish up the Ezra Pound story for us, Eustace, if you would.
Well, Ezra Pound was rescued miraculously, and he left the hellhole at St. Elizabeth and went back to Venice to live out his final years in peace. It was really a miracle.
True enough.
Because everyone in Washington said it could not be done, that he was doomed to spend the rest of his life at St. Elizabeth, and that was the word on Capitol Hill.
Speaking of people getting sprung from prison, probably according to most people, the single greatest traitor in American history in terms of damage done to the United States, Jonathan Pollard, remains, of course, in prison here. And it is in the news that Ariel Sharon presented Presidente Bush with a petition of 120 some odd signatures of the, I guess, members of the Knesset to demand, ask, request, and implore that Jonathan Pollard, a hero in Israel, be released. Now, the big question here is, as much impunity as Bush and his handlers have shown, would they dare turn Jonathan Pollard loose?
Well, I don't think there would be any political gain for Bush to do that. I think there'd be more peril than gain.
Well, I would hope so.
And so I don't think he will do it.
Okay, well, just to keep everybody up to date, the pressure is on to bring Jonathan Pollard home to Israel. All right. We have a break. I'm going to do that break when we come back. If you would, Eustace, let's talk about Senator Joe McCarthy, one of the most written about, one of the most vilified, although in some cases he is accorded the status of a hero, man in American political history. Senator Joe McCarthy. Next up with Eustace Mullins. Okay, we are back talking with Eustace Mullins, and we're going to tell you how to get Eustace Mullins' books. By the way, if you go on eBay or anywhere and just enter the name Mullins, Eustace first name Eustace, you'll get his books, and they're around. They are classics. They again ought to be standard texts in a legitimate school system, education system in this country. But for obvious reasons, they're not. All right, Eustace, tell our listeners about Senator Joe McCarthy.
Well, the most shocking thing I can tell you is that he was a very likable guy. And his former personal secretary, Larry Rense, came up to me. It's a woman, but her name was Larry Rense.
Uh-huh.
And she came up to me at the McCarthy Foundation a couple of years ago, and she said to me, Eustace, I don't know if you know it, but Joe was always a pussycat. And I said, I always do that.
Huh.
He was one of the most shyest, most genial man you'd ever met in your life. And so I read these daily assaults in the press about this evil monster, you know.
Well, they make him out to be some almost on a par with a micro Joseph Stalin in a way.
Yeah.
Reverse the situation, but he is vilified. He is hated and misunderstood, I think, quite clearly by a lot of people. I don't pretend to know a lot about the man, except that what we do know as a general society does not seem to reflect reality. And Eustace is here to talk about that. Now, Bobby Kennedy, of course, had a strong link there, too.
Yes, well, actually, their father, Joe Kennedy, was
Joseph,
one of McCarthy's biggest supporters, and he forced his sons to contribute to Joe McCarthy's campaign for re-election as senator. And they very reluctantly did so. I think JFK gave him $5,000, and Bobby gave him $5,000.
Joseph P. Kennedy, another man that was one of the giants of the last century.
Well, he created his sons. His sons were just shadows of himself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true power, isn't it?
It really is. To be able to pass that on to the next generation.
Yeah. Now,
and he did.
Let me just jump away from Joe McCarthy for a minute. John Kennedy Jr. I covered that story of his death from the very first, and as is often the case with many news stories like that, the best information you get usually arrives in the first couple of hours, and then
That's
the spin.
Right. That is the hot spot.
And then the spin comes in, and the cover-up begins. And the man was murdered, taken out, removed from the situation. All three of them were, for a variety of reasons. And it still amazes me, Eustace, that his plane was left unattended, as a matter of course, at Teterboro Airport. It just was sitting there. Anybody could have walked up and opened that rear baggage hatch and stuck a cigarette pack size of C4 with any number of different detonating devices on it, and that's the end of it.
Well, that young man had no idea that he had become the most dangerous man in the United States, because he was independently wealthy. He had a national magazine, and
he wasn't afraid to ask questions.
He wasn't afraid to ask questions, and he simply had the biggest political reputation in the United States. No one could have run against him.
He had charm. He was obviously very handsome, articulate. He had a legacy, an unfulfilled legacy, which I think everyone, every reasonable person could understand how that would play at the box office, so to speak. Yeah, he had to be removed, no question about it. And he was. And the way that alleged investigation was conducted, the alleged burial at sea, how the Navy, since when is a light plane crash investigated by the Navy? Under virtually top secret conditions. So, anyway, enough. Joe McCarthy held his hearings on television, ruined a lot of people's careers, for better or for worse. That is primarily what he has thought about today. Tell me more about him.
Well, he never really had a crusade. There was never a McCarthy committee. The real power on Capitol Hill at that time was Senator McCarran of Nevada. And Joe didn't even have an investigating committee. So this thing about Joe pillaring people and forcing them to testify was real nonsense.
What was he trying to do? I know this is kind of a silly question, but tell us a lot of people don't know. Tell us what he was trying, what was his crusade about?
Well, his crusade really was against the United States government. He discovered in his investigations that the real strength of communism was its strength in Washington, its strength over the government of the United States. The Stalin government in Moscow was a pale shadow of the real communist power, which is in Washington, D.C.
There are still people today who, perhaps out of ignorance, I don't understand it, frankly, who hail Franklin D. Roosevelt as a great American president.
Well, Franklin D. Roosevelt was the most openly communistic of all, and the Roosevelt money came entirely from his uncle Frederick Delano, who was the biggest opium dealer in Hong Kong. So that's not a very good recommendation.
It's all amazing, isn't it?
It is. But for his three personal assistants to all be active KGB agents, I mean, that's really going a little too far.
Now, I didn't know that.
Well, yes. Lachlan Curry, Alger Hiss, and Harry Dexter White.
Knew about Hiss. All three of his PAs, his personal assistants, were clearly and known to be communists.
Yes.
KGB.
And these are the three people you would have to go through to see
get to him,
Franklin D. Roosevelt. And that meant that if you're an anti-communist, you never had a chance.
No, you never got
in. Getting near that office.
Of course. The same thing happens with a lot of world leaders, though, Eustace. They are essentially controlled by one power structure or another and screened off from even beginning to grasp reality. It happens.
Well, the big word in Washington still today is access. How do you get access to people? And that's the key to everything.
Sure. So how successful was Joseph McCarthy at doing what he was trying to do?
Well, he sort of put a hole in the dike. He did not, the dam did not break during his lifetime, but it did much later. It started leaking and just finally collapsed. And 2 years ago at the meeting of the McCarthy Foundation in Wisconsin, I said for the first time that Joe had defeated communism. He brought down the Berlin Wall and the collapse of Russia. And I think he did because he destroyed their power structure in Washington. And again, it all happened many years after his death, but it did happen. And the CIA was supposedly absolutely astonished that this happened. I think they knew it was coming, but they didn't want it to happen.
Yeah, well, wishful thinking. The idea that Joe McCarthy was responsible for destroying the lives of a number of people in the Hollywood industry and so forth, remains one of the things most closely linked to his name and his legacy.
And that's about the greatest fantasy about McCarthy, because he simply was personally incapable of destroying anyone's life, and he never really was trying to. He was an investigator, and he was trying to get at the facts about what these people were doing.
How much of Hollywood back then was, in your estimation, communist or leaning toward communism?
Well, the producers and directors were practically all communists. Now, the actors themselves were not such active communists. They were mostly communist sympathizers. But the producers and directors were the people who actually produced the pictures and saw to it, they oversaw everything that went into them. The scripts and the direction and the camera work, everything was all part of the system.
How was it that communism became so entrenched in Hollywood? Why was it?
Well, it goes back to the German refugees as they started to come in the early 30s. They went right to Hollywood, and they became the writers and directors of the Hollywood movies. And they had a very single-minded outlook on life, and they stuck to it. They never deviated at all.
When Joe McCarthy, when his hearings came to an end, was the situation appreciably changed? Did he died shortly thereafter? Did he?
Oh yes, he died. I don't think he died of a broken heart. Some people said he did, but I don't believe that. But
you think he was removed?
No, he was more or less worn out.
Just burned himself out.
Yeah. Well, now they at his memorial graveside services in Wisconsin, they pass around his death certificate, which says the hepatitis B was artificially introduced into his system, and he had in massive doses, and it took him right out. So his death certificate, I've seen it, and I've got a copy of it somewhere.
Hepatitis B, that's an unusual illness in the mid-1950s.
Well, it certainly is. And it certainly does not go with alcoholism, which he also was accused of. Mm-hmm. But everybody in Washington drank, and that was...
Please, everybody in Washington drank, and everybody in Washington chain smoked? I mean, that's just the way it was back then.
Well, everybody lived that way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because the movies told them it was okay. And TV, they used to have cigarette ads on television. You've seen old television reruns, you'll see those ads.
Oh, they were loaded with cigarettes.
It was just incredible.
And Washington had the highest alcohol consumption in the United States. The figures are published every year for the entire United States, and Washington always topped the list.
Eustace, what is the best place for people to access your books? Is there a single location you can point to that seems to have more of them available?
No. As a matter of fact, I'm launching a campaign to reprint 6 of my most important books that have been out of print for as long as 10 years.
Good.
And that will be done probably by the middle of October.
Good. Well, they have
and then I'll put out central notice as to where the books can be obtained and so forth.
Well, we'll have you back on the program when that's ready, and we'll give it a launch. So
very good.
Keep that in mind. There are so many online publishers now. All you have to do is send them a manuscript or the old book, and they'll basically put it back together and sell them on demand. I mean, it's really I think it's a wonderful thing that the net has done there.
Well, that's really the way I should do it. I'm still doing it the old-fashioned way.
Well, whatever. Just so they're there, they'll be bought. They'll be bought, no doubt. Okay, speaking of being bought, the Federal Reserve, one of the greatest sellouts in American history, without question, continues to this day to be viewed by most of the sheep in this country as being a component of the federal government, a federal agency, which is basically sort of like the Department of Treasury, and all they do is kind of watch over the money and control inflation and prevent deflation. Just a bunch of good guys. They're trying to help us. Right, Eustace?
Well, that was the invention of Paul Warburg, or a Rothschild employee. He's the person who coined the term Federal Reserve Act. And it was to be federal, it was to have reserves, and it was to be an act of Congress, which they achieved. But it's never been federal. It's always been privately owned, and it has no reserves because it's a bank of issue. It creates money. So you don't need any reserves when you can print all the money you want.
Yeah, that's right. This issue, who was the doggone it, and I can't remember his name, the congressman who stood up and gave the greatest speech against the Federal Reserve, and it
was Charles Augustus Lindbergh, a very famous name in American history because his son became our famous aviator.
Yeah.
And his son also married Dwight Morrow, a partner of J.P. Morgan and Company.
Huh.
So Charles Lindbergh Jr. never attacked the Federal Reserve because he was part of it. In fact, he has 6 children. Each of the President Lindbergh children are worth $1 billion each.
How much?
$1 billion each.
I see.
With a B.
Yeah, I heard that. All right. Now, who was the congressman that blasted the Fed and died shortly thereafter?
Oh, that was Louis McFadden.
Congressman McFadden, and forgive me for forgetting his name, folks, because he is a true American hero.
Oh, he was just a small-town banker from Pennsylvania, and when he came down to Washington as a congressman and saw what was going on in the early 1920s, he led the fight against Eugene Meyer being appointed as chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. And then he tried to impeach the whole Federal Reserve Board.
Right. It is a story that is tragically understood by, 3% of Americans? If you went up to 2% on the street who understand what's going on?
Well, it's not a matter for the media to touch whatsoever the press. They don't. I think the average Washington newspaper man never goes into the Federal Reserve building on Constitution Avenue.
They stay away. Well, they want a career. They don't want to get in trouble. Now, remember, some of the big, high-profile talk show hosts in America, folks, including Rush Limbaugh, will not discuss the Federal Reserve.
That was ironclad. Rush made it very plain when he became a very successful talk show host that he would not talk to any tax protester. He would not mention the Federal Reserve System. Right. And that was it.
And he dismisses the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderbergers and all of those as just clubs for a few industrialists and rich people, and there's nothing else going on there.
Yeah. Strictly crackpots.
That's right.
Rush never allowed any crackpots on his program.
That's right. Crackpots. Conspiracy theorists. Idiots.
Oh, yes.
Idiots. All right, so the Fed to this day has how much control over America's budget, its economy, certainly its currency? How? Let's give our listeners a better look at the size and depth of the extent of the tentacles and where they reach. The Fed controls basically financial America, does it not?
Well, it's a bank of issue. Now, you see propaganda releases from Washington where the government is printing the money. But and they have tours going through on 14th Street where they print the money.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that they're printing it on contract to a private bank, which is the Federal Reserve System, and they're just employees. They print the money for the Federal Reserve Bank.
Right. Is there any backing for U.S. currency anymore? Some people say that the only gold in Fort Knox are bricks that are sprayed gold. No one knows. There hasn't been an inventory done of Fort Knox since the 1950s, if I'm correct.
Well, a friend of mine, Ed Durrell, spent a lot of his own money, several $1 million, proving that there's no gold in Fort Knox.
He proved there isn't any.
Oh, yeah. Because, and at the same time that he was proving there's no gold in Fort Knox, they were leading a delegation of congressmen to Fort Knox to go down and look at the gold bricks in the bottom. You take about 18 stories down into the ground, and they come to a vault, and they herd these congressmen in there, and they see these pile of gold bricks.
And they were bricks, probably.
Well, yes. There was no gold there whatsoever.
Sure. Well, here's a giveaway. Remember, all of you, I think some of you remember, several years ago, there were lists of, in fact, there were hundreds of base closures around the United States, and lists of bases that were to be closed as being useless, outdated, obsolete. Guess what was on the list? Fort Knox.
Yeah, Fort Knox. But they decided to keep it, I think, because every once in a while they'll take a few congressmen down there and show them the gold.
It's so funny. It is so funny, this whole thing. Money now in this country is being, as you know, printed on demand. But more than that, it's not even being printed. It's just all being done with computers at the speed of light. And they just type in however many digits they need and say the money is good, backed by the U.S. government. They send it off to whomever. And it's all not a house of cards. It's vapor.
Oh, it is vapor, and it's been reduced to what it always was, a medium of exchange. Money is simply a medium of exchange. You exchange a couple of greenbacks, and you buy whatever you want.
Sure. How do you see the euro performing against the dollar? Not a big surprise. Again, but this is being manipulated.
Well, it's being manipulated, and of course, a lot of people are making a lot of money off of the euro.
Yeah.
When it started, it looked like the euro, which was created out of nothing, just like the Federal Reserve dollars. They had the same source actually, so it was the same as the Federal Reserve dollar. But when it was, there were serious doubts raised about the euro that it would ever make it because there was nothing behind it. Well, that is no obstacle, as we've seen from the history of the Federal Reserve System.
No obstacle at all. I, by the way, have been able to get James to link Eustace Mullins' name to the Amazon.com selection of books that are available now. By all means, look on eBay for more Eustace Mullins books that are out of print. You'll see them there, but there are some available.
Well, Amazon was my biggest distributor for 5 years, and they got the word from somebody, and they stopped paying me for my books. They owe me about $25,000 right now, which they refused to pay.
They just stopped.
And the reason, they gave a very good explanation for this. They said that after a certain date, they decided that they would unilaterally decree that any book that did not have an ISBN number, and I didn't have an ISBN number on that particular book, they said they would list it as never being received. So I was shipping them cases of books for resale, and they were listing them as never receiving them, so they never paid me for them.
Do we know that they were being sold?
Oh, yes, they sold every book that I ever sent them.
I'm sure they did. All right, well, let me do this. I'm going to remove the link, and I'm going to direct all of you to go to eBay, which has a zillion books, and enter Eustace Mullins' name. All right, if that's the case, Amazon.com has much to be ashamed about, and I'm still going to
file suit against Amazon. I haven't done it yet because I've been so busy.
Yeah.
I'm always so busy writing more books that I don't have time to sue people that owe me for the ones I've sold them.
Well, and Amazon is welcome to come on this program and defend its position if it would like to.
Oh, I was on the phone for them for hours and hours, and they would shift me around to the different departments, customer service, the financial department, and I finally gave up.
I'm sure they were. It's called volleyball. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I got the full volleyball treatment.
Okay, stand by. We'll be back. So go to eBay for Eustace Mullins books. I'm going to pull that link. Thanks. back. Eustace, a lot of people talk about taking back control of our
I hear that
country.
all the time. Pat Buchanan says that. Take back the country, you know.
Yeah. And again, I still fashion myself an optimist, but more than that, I'm a realist. And I think the point of no return has long since passed us by, and I don't think there's any way to take it back, especially through the ballot box, given the electronic voting issues we all know are going on now, to make damn sure that the elections are utterly controlled at any step along the way by any number of organizations and power structures. So I just don't see it happening. Do you?
Oh, well, you can't take back something if you no longer own it.
Well, that's right. It's like you've had something taken from you under duress, by hook, by crook, certainly by scheming. It's gone. It's officially owned by somebody else. So try and take it back.
Well, you really have no legal claim.
Well, the courts
aren't prove ownership.
The courts aren't going to stand by you either. You go up, you get past you might get past the first level. You go to the second, the circuit level. As soon as you hit the federal level, it's over.
Well, the Supreme Court, I've sued in almost every court in the United States, but I never filed a case with the Supreme Court because they're all political appointees. Well, they all are, all the way down the line. But on the Supreme Court, they're very powerful, very well protected, and you can have no influence with those people whatsoever.
How would you describe the current moral integrity of the United States Congress?
Well, it's almost laughable because there's no integrity there whatsoever. They are actors. They're like any paid actor in Hollywood. They're acting a role and they're reciting speeches which they haven't even written, and they're
voting on patriot acts which they've never seen even in print.
Well, I think that became custom long ago in Washington that you never read about something that you're told to vote for.
It's true. Then there's always plausible deniability if push comes to shove.
Oh, yes, it is.
I'm always amazed also at how the amendments to bills, which have nothing whatever to do with the bill on the floor, are used so effectively to ratchet away even more of our rights and freedoms and impose more laws. This amendment process there's something humorous about it.
Well, it really is, and they found out it was a marvelous technique because they could get anything through, and nothing would ever be said about it. In fact, I don't know how you would fight it because it comes through as a rider or an amendment. There's no way that you could tilt against that windmill.
Exactly. It just amazes me that we're getting into another political season and people are actually taking this system seriously. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way I see it.
Well, I wonder if anyone is taking it seriously.
Well,
I've had the feeling for a number of years that nobody in Washington knows what they're doing, and they don't care what they're doing.
Well, you notice I didn't say the people listening to this program, but there are a lot of people out there who do, and they're getting their bumper stickers ready and all the rest of it, and they think that their man is new and has a chance. Believe me, if anybody comes along who really had a chance to upset the system, the propeller would fall off their airplane like it did with Senator Inhofe, or something else would happen to them. Because assassination and murder are a structural part of American politics.
Well, Huey Long was the last dangerous person that came along. He scared the life out of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They assassinated Huey Long, and they haven't had a serious rival since then. Well, there was John Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was also a very serious threat.
What do you think, Eustace, about the various theories about, I don't want to get into the JFK assassination, but give very quickly, was there one particular thing that you think sealed his fate?
No, I think it was the fact that they didn't have enough leverage over him, and that's the reason that JFK Jr. had to go. They had no leverage against him whatsoever. There's no way they could control him, so they had to get rid of him.
And Bobby?
Well, Bobby was part of the older generation, John F. Kennedy's brother, and he was very close to his father, Joe, and he was pretty well trained by his old man, and he knew what was going on.
Well, he worked with Joe McCarthy.
Yes.
People don't know that either.
Yes, he worked for Joe McCarthy at the same time I did.
Did you have much encounter with Bobby Kennedy?
No, I had no encounter. I never met him at all. See, I worked as a researcher for Joe, and I was out of sight most of the time.
Sure.
I think that somebody must have told Joe to keep me out of sight anyway.
Well, with an asset like you, I would protect and...
I never thought about it for years, but I just wasn't visible around there.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Eustace, marvelous information. Thank you. Stand by. We'll come back another half hour to go with Eustace Mullins. Okay, back with Eustace Mullins. One of his many remarkable books is, I think I've got the title right, Murder by Injection, Eustace?
Oh, yes, Murder by Injection. That's the only history of the American Medical Association. And I wrote the book because I went to the Library of Congress once to find out something about him, and I found out they had no book about him.
None. The only history of the AMA.
Yes.
And why Morris Fishbine's face isn't a Mount Rushmore, it remains a mystery to me. Gee, what a terrible tyrant that guy was.
He really was. And he knew how to use power. He used it, too. You know, the American Medical Association is the largest single landowner in the Chicago area today.
It is?
It is.
The AMA?
The AMA, because they made so much money...
killing people.
And,
sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
And selling, they sold their approval, you know, the AMA approval.
Sure, you get that stamp of
approvals to all the pharmaceutical companies.
There you go.
They lined up. They couldn't sell anything without the AMA approval, and they made so much money. They put most of the money in Chicago real estate.
Incredible.
That was during the early 20s, during the boom years.
Yeah.
They were boom years for the AMA.
I wonder how many viable, important, relatively inexpensive cures, treatments, therapies Morris Fishbine personally suppressed, quashed, destroyed, bought up, and hid away during his tenure. Dozens, at least.
Oh, dozens, because everyone that couldn't be sold for a large profit, they got rid of.
Such as the amazing brilliance of Royal Raymond Rife, curing disease organisms with simple radio frequency waves.
Well, that would have stopped the cancer thing right there.
On the spot. Well, what's really amazing about Rife's story is, forgotten her first name now, Scripps, the woman, she was the power of the Scripps family. Anyway, she died, and her huge estate down there near La Jolla, the Scripps estate, was where the USC School of Medicine, working with Royal Raymond Rife, set up Rife to do a formal first-class medical, clinical, observable trial with his beam ray tube, which emitted the frequency which killed the organism, the cancer organism, which was a virus at the time, the most prominent kind. And they took him, as you know, you folks who listen long enough, 16 people who were dying of cancer to the Scripps Institute. The Scripps, it was the estate is what it was. It was the home. It was a mansion. They took these people. They had to be taken by ambulance. They were that far gone. Now, Royal Raymond Rife had his technology there, and within, I think it was 60 days or less, virtually everyone, and they were all cured within 90 days. 100% cured. And one of the doctors who came there to observe this noticed that one of the male patients who came in while laying on the table for an examination was so emaciated, he said you could see the actual lump of his spinal process by looking at the top side of his stomach. It was nothing left of the guy. He cured him. He cured all of them. And of course, that alerted the AMA that this man was onto something, big trouble, and Morris Fishbein et al. Went after him and destroyed him. But that's just one of the more tragic instances of why we've had tens of millions of people die hideous, horrible deaths in the last 70 years, thanks to the AMA. True stories.
I think they deliberately let them die slowly and horribly because
make
it was
more
a good
money that
lesson
way.
for everybody.
Good lesson, that's right. It's put more fear of the whole process of cancer into people. But there are so many other. Rife wasn't the only one. There were others, of course. And the business of dying is profitable. The business of curing people is not nearly as profitable.
Well, one of the cheapest remedies today is ordinary hydrogen peroxide, and I use it myself. At
food grade. Yeah.
Food grade, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in fact, I had my right knee. I was almost locked up about 20 years ago, and I started using hydrogen peroxide every day, and I was walking around as good as new in a few weeks.
Now that's available in health food stores.
And every drugstore.
Yeah, just make sure it's food grade, not the...
Well, the food grade is only in the health stores. Mm-hmm. The ordinary hydrogen peroxide is at all the drugstores.
You use that too?
Oh, yeah, I use that too. I use it topically, not internally.
Right. Okay, I want to make that sure. You don't get the two confused, because the
only the food grade can be used internally.
That's right. The stuff in the drugstores, folks, don't take it, but you can use it on wounds, on cuts, on anything external. I brush my teeth with it.
Oh, yeah.
It does a magnificent job of cleaning all that garbage off your teeth. Just put a little in your mouth, swish it around, and brush your teeth and rinse it out. But don't swallow it. Food-grade hydrogen peroxide has been around for a long time. How much do you take a day?
Oh, I use about a third of a pint a day, topically.
Right, okay. And as far as the food grade goes?
And the food grade, I use that, not quite as liberally.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you can check it out. It's in health food stores. And what it does is real simple. It oxygenates your bloodstream and your body, and most bacteria and viruses cannot tolerate oxygen. The oldest therapy on the planet is breathing. That's why runners and athletes are usually in pretty good shape, because they hyperoxygenate your body. That's why hyperbaric oxygen chambers can do wondrous things for
they
stubborn.
Can do tremendous things.
They should be standard.
Every hospital should have one.
Should be standard operating procedure for any bacterial infection immediately. And in Europe, of course, for over 60 years now, the doctors there in many clinics, hospitals, even the dentists in Sweden use ozone oxygen gas to blow into cavities after they've drilled the tooth out to sterilize it. Takes 2 seconds, and it works. And they use ozone oxygen therapy in a clinical setting to take care of all sorts of health issues. But these, again, we're talking about a gas, which is virtually cost-free. And the big boys, the pharmaceuticals, don't want anything to do with that. So we have to keep informed and keep looking. And if you do your research on the internet into ozone therapy, there's a marvelous documentary called Ozone and the Politics of Medicine. You can find it if you look around for it. It's a stunner. All right, be right back with Eustace Mullins. Talk a little bit more about murder by injection in just a couple minutes. Talking with Eustace Mullins. One segment left to go, Eustace, that's all, and you have countless hours of material. What would you like to talk about in this? Anything more about murder by injection, the AMA? That's a stunning issue about the property. And goodness knows how much they own in other places, but what would you like to cover?
The crusade that I'm on right now is to expose the Constitution and how they got rid of the Articles of Confederation and had a secret convention to rewrite the Articles of Confederation. And actually, I wrote a whole new Constitution, and most of the dirty work has been done in this country since the Constitution was adopted.
Really? So the Confederacy was, in other words, the wrong side won the Civil War.
Oh, the wrong side. The Southern states were fighting for freedom. You see, the Articles of Confederation guaranteed state sovereignty, and that's how the Southern states seceded.
Right.
And so the Northern armies came in and reimposed the Constitution on the entire United States. And the Articles of Confederation had never been. That's why it was called the Confederacy, because they seceded under the Articles of Confederation.
So they seceded legally.
Yes. They seceded legally, and they were illegally conquered and invaded, just like we invaded Iraq.
New book out called The Real Lincoln.
Yes.
I had that author on, some months ago now. Incredible work. Tells the story. And even if you disagree with half of it, it's got to change your thinking about what happened, what the Civil War was all about.
Oh, the story of the Civil War has never been told. It hasn't even been touched on. It's one of the biggest stories. I'm working on it now.
What a wonderful pursuit. Thank you. I look forward to that. I have long felt that the issues were so obfuscated by obviously what's going on here. Those who win the war tell the story.
Yeah.
It's the South. The war had nothing to do with slavery, basically.
Oh no, never had anything to do with slavery. In fact, Lincoln himself was one of the. I think he ran for election in 1860, and he promised not to free that
That's right.
No emancipation.
That's correct. Now that the author Tom, what's his name? I'll find it in a minute. But he made that point very clear, and the research proves it. Yes. Lincoln's own words. He pulled Lincoln's own addresses, his own text, and put together a whole different picture of the whole Lincoln thing. Tom D. Lorenzo.
Oh, that's great.
Is the author of the book, The Real Lincoln.
Well, it'll get some circulation.
Yeah, well, it already has. Fortunately, we poor Americans. I love America, and I as much an American as anyone else. And I like so many of you listening, I lament what has happened to this country. Part of it is our fault. Part of it is that we have been subjugated by an enemy who is far more clever, with unlimited technology and unlimited money to use against us to do exactly what is being done.
Well, the urge for liberty was always from a very small part of the colonists. There's a new book out called Albion Seed, which points out that the whole resistance to England came from the families of 250,000 Scotch-Irish Presbyterian in this country, and the descendants of 120,000 Puritans in the New England area. That was the whole revolution. Nothing else.
Well, I assume you are still in favor of the concept of breaking away from England.
Oh well, yes. You see, the biggest con was that they never told us we never broke away from England.
Well, that to this day remains one of the biggest secrets of all.
It is. And that's a secret that no American has any idea about. They think, well, we have our independence, and they won't give up that idea.
Mm-hmm. How much freedom is left? How much of American liberty is left on the scale of 10, Eustace? Saying that we're down to about at least 5 or 4. How bad is it?
Oh, it's up to 7, I would say.
So only three left.
3 left.
And with the laws on the books now, including the Patriot Act and the pending son of Patriot Act, those 3 will disappear and could disappear overnight.
Oh, they could, because the war against terror is being intensified.
I'm still trying to figure out who the terrorists are. Do you have it figured out yet?
I don't know who the terrorists are, but I know who the victims are. The victims are the American people.
They sure are.
We're the only people imperiled by terror.
Well, and let's also not forget, and I know you don't, those people in Afghanistan, in Iraq, who have been slaughtered over the years, and other countries, Bosnia, Yugoslavia. How many wars have there been fought? How many bloodlettings? We go back to World War I.
Oh, yes,
forward
and every
to World
one
War
is
II.
an atrocity, and the atrocities continue.
And
they got Iran and Syria lined up, but I don't know if they're going for them or not. I really don't.
What do you think? What do you think the gambit will be with the re-election here? Will they sacrifice Bush and try to put John Kerry, another member of Skull and Bones, in the White House to make it look like the American people have arisen, they were outraged, and they threw the cur out of office? So there's still power to the people. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, I don't think they're going to get rid of Bush because he won the war. You stick with the winner, you know.
That was no war.
Well,
of course.
No, it was a massacre. But no, I don't think they're going to get rid of Bush because Bush is right up there with the top boys. I pointed out repeatedly that the Bush family's never been anything but a lackey of the Harrimans, and the Harrimans have never been anything but a lackey of the Rothschilds. But he's a good lackey, and I don't think they're going to get rid of him.
He is really about the perfect front man, isn't he?
Oh, I think he is, and he's fairly presentable, not too impossible to look at.
Well, people can have a lot of fun poking at him and laughing at his poor syntax and his rather spotty speech at times when he tries to wing it, and I think that's all part of the diversion.
Well, it's diversion because it doesn't really mean much to most Americans.
No. I find him to be really the perfect front man for what's going on now. Now, but again, you got to look at what I mentioned. John Kerry is talked about by many as being a potential Democrat savior, but he is a member of Skull and Bones also. They guys are in the same club.
And he's married to a very wealthy girl, the Hines girl, and Senator Hines, died very mysteriously also.
Yes, he did. Was a helicopter hit an airplane or something?
Yeah, it was a very
allegedly,
accident. Now, I've flown for years, and I never had a helicopter come out of nowhere and hit my airplane.
Yeah, it was bizarre, to put it mildly.
Very bizarre.
Now, the name Jacob Schiff.
The Prince of Israel.
All right. His grandson married Al Gore's daughter.
Yes.
So
Katrina.
So we need to keep in mind, I won't use the tired cliche of connect the dots, but you've got to watch how the threads are all interwoven here. It's the same piece of cloth, different threads, different designs here and there, but it's the same fabric.
It's the same fabric, and it's always good gold cloth.
It sure is. People who are hoping, Eustace, that gold will make a big rally. Gold, of course, being artificially depressed for a long time and controlled. China now about to allow its citizens to own gold for the first time. The Chinese, notoriously a very frugal and saving people. The Japanese run on gold last year was indicative of a pretty large measure of unease amongst the populace. What do you see as a future for gold?
Well, gold and silver both will have a pretty good rise as the economy starts its road back. I call this a 30-year depression, and we're only in the fourth year of it. So, but it isn't going to last that long. And they're working on getting things back because you have to fatten the cattle before you kill them.
Gee, that's a rather crude analogy, but...
Well, I don't mean to be so crude, but unfortunately, that's the way it works.
It's well. Look, the U.S. public was invited into the stock market with that big boom in the '90s, that late boom, yeah. And fattened up and then slaughtered to the tune of, what was it, $6 trillion when the market
$8 trillion.
$8 trillion. Now
I wrote an article about it called "The $8 Trillion Heist," and I said the FBI, no law enforcement agency has ever shown any interest in the theft of $8 trillion from the American people. It was one of the boldest robberies of all time.
You have said it perfectly. 8 trillion. I thought it was 6, but
no. The New York Times said it was 8 trillion, and it was all done between March and November of 2000. It was just a 6-month operation.
Incredible, truly incredible.
It is incredible.
Wow, Eustace, thank you. They say it's the greatest show on earth, and it is, I guess, anything but boring. It's certainly predictable, but
well, I've never had a boring day yet.
I like that. Let me know when your book comes out, and
I certainly will.
Please, we'll have you back. Thanks for the time, Eustace.
All right, I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Eustace Mullins, truly an American icon. And we will continue in a few minutes.